All right, I want to talk late season hunting, but I specifically want to talk about the type of night where you can absolutely see a pile of deer during the late season, and the type of night you can see those bucks that have been nocturnal throughout most of the hunting season. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the type of setup you need to have in order to see deer in the first place, because you can have the right kind of night to be out there, but if you don't have the right kind of habitat set up and the right kind of food on your land, you're still not going to see deer. So let's talk about that first.
So I've talked about it a lot, but late season you absolutely need good thermal cover. So good thermal cover is cover that gets the deer out of the nasty winter elements. That's often low-lying swamps. They can be cedar swamps or just swamps that have good elements of cover mixed in with shrubs, cattails, some conifers. But low-lying swamps are phenomenal thermal cover, especially if those swamps have ample food in the form of red osier dogwood, which is like candy for deer. If you have good adjacent food to a large swamp, swamps are often the areas that deer will congregate in very large numbers, especially the further north you get in the U.S. during the late season. Now, another area of great thermal cover for deer are conifer stands. So if you have a property where you don't have good thermal cover in the form of a large swamp, this is a way that you can add thermal protection to your land and give your deer a place to lay during the late season. Because with good thick conifer stand, deer can lay under the branches, they can get out of the snow. If you have spruce around that conifer stand, they're able to have some of that side cover they need to protect themselves from the wind. But conifer stands are definitely areas where deer will congregate when the weather gets nasty. What I really like is when you have a conifer stand like this, where there's some mixed woody browse in, because deer need food where they bed, and woody browse is one of the most crucial food sources deer can have during the late season. Adding woody browse is actually the best supplemental food source that you can give to your deer during the late season, because that's when they literally survive off of woody browse. Now, if you have good thermal cover and you have good late season food sources in the form of corn, beans, brassicas to some degree, and ample woody browse, you have all the elements you need for good late season hunting. Now, the night you want to be on stand is when you have an extreme temperature drop for your area. So for my area, Minnesota, that's when I see the temperatures getting to -10, -20, -25, even -30 degrees. Now, that night might not be the same for where you're at, but whatever an extreme temperature drop is, that's when you want to be on stand, because that's when the deer will absolutely pour out onto the food sources from their thermal bedding. In this particular food plot, I watched 44 deer come out to this food plot one night, and I got a shot at a buck that was probably a mid 150s 10 pointer with some trash. Now, I wasn't able to actually get that deer, which is a long story in and of itself, but the reason he was out was because it was December 14th, and it was -18 degree. It was a -18 degree air temp with -30 wind chills. So the deer came out early and they came out ready to feed. So I set up in a transition area and I was able to get a crack at that deer at last light. We have tons of stories where we have been hunting late season and we've seen deer out in daylight that we haven't seen out in daylight all season long, and that's because we're hunting on those miserably cold nights. But those deer are coming out early because they want to put on the feed bag, because they need that energy to be able to push through and survive when the temperature drops to those extreme cold temperatures. So if you're able to handle the cold and you see that you have extreme cold coming, that can be a great chance to get that buck you've been after all season long.